Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Connecting Dots podcast. Our today's guest is based out of the Bay Area, and he has been with several high performing and super successful tech companies in the world. And I'm very excited to be interviewing him today. Other than that, he has an active LinkedIn presence, and his content is not only thought provoking and knowledgeable, but it's also very well structured. So, with that, let's get right into it. How are you doing, Hasan?
I'm glad, Alhamdulillah. How are you?
I'm good too. Thank you so much for asking. So, with that, I first of all want to ask you about the role of being a senior software engineer. What kind of competencies needed to be successful in that role?
Right. So, in software engineering, there are different levels, and the titles of a senior software engineer may apply at at varying responsibility levels in different companies because there's no standard as such, right? So, for uh, in one company, there will be a level two engineer, maybe senior software engineer. In another company, level five might be senior software engineer. But if we generalize it, the understanding usually from a senior software engineer is that this person can design a full feature end to end on their own without having to, you know, having somebody else design it for them. More junior engineers usually are told specific things to implement by somebody who's senior, who's designed the solution. So there's more design involved for senior engineers, whereas junior engineers are more implementation focused. And there's also an aspect of mentorship and guiding other team members, and not just things that you are directly responsible for, but reviewing designs, for example, for engineers in the team. In some companies, senior engineers are also not limited to their own team, but the expectation is that they have influence outside of their team, so maybe neighboring teams within the same working group. uh, so the expectations can vary, but the general idea is that the person is not just doing their own work, but also guiding others and helping them out.
Right. So does that mean that one has to just spend more time understanding the product itself? Because I mean, you can read a lot of books and build that competency for design. But I mean, that's my perception that it might have to be specific to the product. But what is your take on that?
Right. So generally, when you've been in the company for a while, if you understand the product and code, that gives you an edge and helps you in your role as a software engineer, as a senior software engineer. You can guide others only when you know enough about the product. That's true. But there are other aspects that come with experience, right? So a senior software engineer is not just somebody who's just read more books, but they have practical experience. They've tried things. They know what works and what doesn't work. And the it's like playing football. If you can read a book about football and knowing all the rules, but unless it's on the ground, right? So uh, yeah, so that kind of, you could be hired as a senior software engineer and you wouldn't have a lot of domain knowledge about the product and whatnot, but you can still review designs and highlight flaws and general conceptual flaws in the design and things like that.
Right, makes sense, makes sense.
Yeah.
Other than that, as a spectator, I'd say that I've seen a lot of young leadership at these ultra successful companies that you've worked with.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about it. That how are these companies strengthening these young individuals to be successful in terms of not just their technical knowledge, but also to be a leader?
Yeah, so some of the my observation is that in these big companies there is a lot of focus on performance management and promotion based on your feedback from your peers and your managers. In more traditional organizations, it's the length of time that you've been in the organization that helps you climb the ladder. Whereas if you are showing your competence and you're showing this demonstrating impact, then how long you've been in the company is not basically that important, because there is a well-defined criteria for each level. And in the performance reviews, if you can prove with your self feedback and your feedback of your peers and the work products that you produce, that I'm operating at the next level, then there is no reason why I shouldn't be promoted, right? So I've seen people who've been hired in the company and they got promoted in one performance cycle. So performance cycle can be 6 months or 1 year. Some companies do, perf reviews once a year, or some companies do twice a year. So every performance cycle, you have the opportunity to prove yourself. And so in any company, if you have this kind of 360 review model and where your promotions are based on are not driven directly by your manager, solely by your manager, but where you can make your case and have there's usually a promotion committee, and they review all of this, and that committee helps make the whole process a bit unbiased. So I think that helps a lot. If you look at some of the young CEOs, they have been in the company like for not more than 10, 15 years, and they reached the top position, and that's how, because they've been getting promoted every year.
No, that's pretty cool, and it's very interesting to get an insight from, I would say, in my opinion, an industry expert like you. So moving on, in your decade-long professional experience, what kind of feature that you might have worked with that you're really proud of,
Uh,
or like a product or a feature, something like that?
I generally enjoy working on anything as long as it's impacting the customers and making them happy, regardless how small or big the feature is. So, for example, in my current role, I'm working in Chrome OS and just making some of the experience of launching Android apps reliable. So every improvement that I make, it just makes me happy because it delights the customer. In that sense, many things that I've implemented in different companies, I like them all. The things that are more closer to my heart are my personal projects that I've worked on the side.
That is great. That is great. Thank you for that insight. Other than that, I would want to ask you that, again, as a spectator, I'd say that life in the Bay Area seems to be, or appears to be, very fast paced, very exciting, and very adrenaline pumping. So, in your experience, and also being a dad, how do you balance your work and life?
Right. So how busy your work day, or whether you face challenges in your work-life balance, depends on which company you're working for. It has less to do with the Bay Area in general, but the general understanding is there are a lot of startup companies in the Bay Area, and we're working for a startup. The culture of startup is sort of similar regardless where you are, and it's possible that the impression has built up because of a lot of people working in startups. Startups usually, they're working in high pace and they want to deliver quickly, and things break and they have to make things work, and so things can become challenging. But if you're working for a company, or a specific product which is already stable and have a lot of team members supporting it, then you won't have that much of an issue. So in my current role, for example, it's an operating system. It's not like a server side. It's a product that you would have 24/7 on-call rotation. I have the flexibility of dealing with issues during my work hours. Most of the time, there are teams in other time zones that can take over issues if something happens. So those kind of things help in my current role. But in my previous roles, where there was a live service that I was supporting, and then there was on-call rotation, and those kind of things made it difficult. But
Yeah, and also in my experience, I'd say the time that I worked in previously in the teams that are directly customer facing, there was a bit of tension because like you have to provide daily updates to the customer and stuff like that, so it gets pretty stressful at times.
yeah.
So other than that, transitioning a little bit from the professional life towards the academic life. So how was your undergrad experience, and how do you think it had prepared you for the professional life that you are in right now?
So I've studied from Bahria University in Islamabad, Pakistan. I've done Bachelor of Software Engineering. I don't think I made good use of my time. The courses that we read, and there was not a lot of focus on understanding the content, but there was focus on just passing the exams and just doing the project and assignments. We were not in the mindset of preparing ourselves for the industry, right? And things that have helped me is doing projects on my own, and maybe picking up some concepts. I feel like I've learned a lot of things again after I went into the industry because I wasn't paying attention. So I'm not a good example of how the time should be spent in the university. That's what my advice to the young students is, you know, focus on understanding the content and doing your assignments yourself and your projects. Don't have big groups where you don't know uh, enough about the whole project and you get to do a very small part. And
True, true.
yeah,
But I guess a bit of that is that we as human beings maybe are a bit naive at that time, and we it's a whole new world to
okay.
us, and that it's just that excitement and that bit of independence, I'd say, there's a lifestyle shift. So I guess most of us are just adapting at that time, and then eventually we become more serious towards it when the final year project comes in.
Yeah.
Other than that, Hasan, I would want to ask you about PhD. Considering that you had a good exposure with a lot of with a lot of strong companies, so do you think it is beneficial to complement ourselves with a PhD if we want to excel in our technical career leading up to a CTO?
So I can only speak about the level that I've reached at. I don't know whether having a PhD would help in going levels above the level that I am at because I haven't experienced that. So far, I haven't felt the need of. I've just done bachelor's. I haven't done master's either. So I haven't felt the need of doing another degree to, propel myself. And I think if somebody is interested in research kind of roles or getting, advanced knowledge in specific focus area, it may make sense. But growing as a software engineer, the way if you look at the engineering ladder, and if you look at the responsibilities and how they gauge your growth, there is less focus on the depth of your technical knowledge and more on your impact. And for example, there's the higher you climb the ladder, it's more about your people skills, your project management skills, and these kind of things you don't learn in PhD. You're basically doing research in a specific area. Now, there is need in the industry for people to have specialized knowledge in those areas, and they do hire, PhDs for those specific uh, cases. But vast majority of people, if you see in the leadership positions, they don't necessarily have PhD or even masters. They got there because they demonstrated excellent leadership and people skills and management skills.
Right, right. Makes sense. So, shifting gears a little bit, in the light of your own experience, do you think there is more value in growing within an organization, or do you think it's better to, after few or several years, let's say, is there more value in switching the companies after some time?
So there are pros and cons, right? If you stay in the company, you get to develop relationships, you understand the product, you understand the company values, you can climb the ladder much easily in that company because you have built your reputation there and you understand how to get things done. But so as long as you're growing, it depends on your personal priorities also. Sometimes you have to switch companies or you have to switch teams in order to challenge yourself and broaden your horizon and learn new things. So personally, I feel I wouldn't stay in the company just for my vertical growth. If I can, I don't see doing challenge. I see myself doing challenging work or learning new skills. I would move to a different team within the same company if I can, or I would switch a company. And I think there's some learning there, not just by different companies have different ways of solving problems. They have different priorities, so you get to learn that as well when you have exposure to different companies. So there's pros and cons. It depends what you. If you look at, for example, CEOs, some of the big companies, they've been in the companies, those companies like for more than a decade. If they've been moving around, they wouldn't be CEOs. So
Yeah.
it really depends what your priorities are.
Yeah. Right, makes sense. That's pretty thought provoking. Other than that, Hassan, in your experience again, how do you see success? Because again, when I was in university, the definition was different. But as I'm growing through different phases in life, I'd say it has evolved for me as well. So in your experience, considering you have a family and you have a very strong tech career, how do you see success now?
So success, I think the definition should not come from anyone outside, and every person should have their own definition of what they think is success. Don't let other people define your standards. For me personally, I think contentment and growth is important. As long as I'm growing, as long as uh, I, I have good relationships with my family, and I'm technically uh, improving myself, and I have religious commitments that I can fulfill. As a Muslim, the success in this life is being able to accomplish the purpose of our existence, because this life is temporary. So if somebody becomes a CEO but they don't recognize their creator or the purpose they were here on this earth for, then I don't think that's success. So we have to take a holistic view on looking at all aspects of life. If, for example, somebody is, you know, driving a car, and they think their measure of success is driving the car really fast, and that's the only thing they care about, then they could bump into another car and just lose their life, right? So when you're driving the car, you have to make sure you don't just take a look at what speed are you going, are you following the rules and everything. So,
Yeah,
well, you
and honestly,
that's
it's very
yeah.
uh, yeah, it's very thought provoking that you've mentioned that as well. Lately, I was talking to my wife about the same concept as well, and we actually bought a Quran, which is just English translation, not the Arabic, because honestly, we just want to spend this month just understanding about the book itself, and honestly, I'm pretty excited about that journey, to be honest. So moving on. I want to ask you about the mentors. Like, what kind of mentors did you experience in your journey, and how did you connect with them?
I most of I've been fortunate to have good supporting colleagues and managers in my career, and that's where there wasn't an official mentorship relationship, but I've learned a lot from people that I've worked with. I had the blessing of working with highly technical and competent people in most of my companies. So there hasn't been like official meeting of I want your advice and things like that. But I've made efforts to learn from them, things they say, things they write, and the way they carry on their work projects, and so that's how I've learned from other people. I've had, for example, when I didn't own a computer, when I was interested in programming, my home tutor who was just teaching me maths and science, I would have him tell me a program to make because I'm learning programming, and he happened to studying a bachelor's in software engineering. So he would give me a program, I would write it, and then I'd have him review it. And similarly, I've had great colleagues in early in my career where they reviewed my work, gave me advice. And that's basically how I've grown as a software engineer.
Yeah, no, that is an amazing journey in itself. So now that we are reaching the climax of our conversation, we'll rather switch to a fun side of the conversation. So if I were to ask you what things excite you in life, what would your answer be?
Learning, as long as I'm learning and I'm using my time productively, I'm having good relationships with my family, making people that are close to me happy. That just makes me happy myself.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. And let's say if you were to solve one global issue, what would it be?
There are so many issues that I can't pick one. I wish I don't have the solution for these issues. I wish there could be peace. I wish there could be, we could solve world hunger and nobody had to, starve
Yeah,
and things like that.
right. No, that's very beautifully put. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Use your time more productively
Yeah.
and be in good company.
Right. Well, with that, would like to wrap up our conversation, Hassan. Once again, it's a huge fan moment for me since I never knew this could have been possible. But I'm glad that I reached out to you, and thank you so much for dedicating some time for us to have this conversation. As far as our audience is concerned, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you like the content, please feel free to share it with your family and your friends. And most importantly, let us know about your feedback in the comments. This podcast is going to be hosted on all major platforms, so feel free to check it out. And until the next episode, take care.